The star was dying. Everyone could see it now. Ambassador stood at the tall window of her tower and watched the sky turn colors it should never turn. The sun that had warmed her world for millions of years was now sick. It pulsed and swelled like a wounded heart. Scientists said it would explode in 18 months. When it did, everything would burn. Every city, every forest, every child. 12 billion lived on this world. They were beings made of living crystal, their bodies catching light and turning it into rainbows. They had existed for 10,000 years. They had built cities that sang when the wind blew through them. They had never known war. They had never needed weapons. Now they needed a miracle. Turned away from the window and walked to the communication chamber. Her crystal feet made soft chiming sounds on the floor. She had sent the message 3 days ago, a plea for help, a cry that went out to every corner of the galaxy. Surely someone would answer. Surely someone would come. The chamber hummed to life as responses began to arrive. The first was from the Dominion. They were an old race, powerful and proud. Their message was long and full of numbers. Read it slowly. They had calculated how many ships it would take to move 12 billion people. They had measured distances and fuel costs and time. At the end, they wrote their conclusion. The evacuation was not possible. The numbers did not work. They sent their regrets. The second message came from the collective. There were the beings in the galaxy. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had studied the dying star and run 1 million simulations. Their message was short. Stopping a star from exploding was against the laws of physics. It could not be done. They were sorry. More messages came. The swarm said they did not have enough ships. The Federation said the distance was too great. The tribes said it was not their concern. One by one, every great civilization of the galaxy sent the same answer. No. Read the last message from the Elder Council of the Galactic Concord. This was the ruling body of 1,000 worlds. If anyone could help, it was them. She opened the message with trembling hands. The council had met for 3 days. They had discussed and debated. They had considered every option. In the end, they had reached their decision. The situation was regrettable, they wrote. The loss of the would be mourned, but the evacuation was impossible. The star could not be saved. They would record thee in the great archives. Their memory would live on. That was all. 12 billion lives dismissed in a few cold sentences. Sat alone in the dark chamber. Outside, the sick sun painted the sky in angry reds and oranges. Children were crying in the streets. Parents held them close and had no words of comfort. The crystal cities that had stood for thousands of years would soon be ash. She thought about her own daughter, only 7 years old. She thought about the life her daughter would never have, the songs she would never sing, the family she would never raise. All of it would end because no one in the vast, ancient galaxy would help them. She began to weep. Her tears were like tiny diamonds, falling to the floor with soft clicks. Then the communication panel beeped. Almost did not look. She had read enough rejections, but something made her reach out and touch the screen. A new message had arrived. It came from very far away, from a region of space that most maps did not even show. The outer rim, the empty places where young races lived and died without anyone noticing. The message was short. It had no calculations. It had no simulations. It had no apologies. It said, "We are coming, hold on." Stared at the words. She did not understand. She checked the source of the message. It came from a small blue planet called Earth, orbiting an ordinary yellow star. The species that lived there called themselves humans. She had never heard of them. She searched the archives for information. What she found was not encouraging. Humans were young. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago. Their ships were small and slow compared to the great vessels of the conquered. They lived very short lives, barely 100 years, and they spent a third of that time sleeping. They had a history full of war and conflict and struggle. By every measure, They were one of the least advanced species in the galaxy. And yet they had answered. They were the only ones who had answered. Sent back a reply. She thanked them for their kindness, but she explained that the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had already said it was impossible. The numbers did not work. The physics did not allow it. She did not want these primitive creatures to die trying to save her people. The response came quickly. We understand. We have seen the numbers. We have read the physics. We know what everyone says is impossible. We are coming anyway. She wrote back again. She told them about the radiation from the dying star. She told them about the distances and the time. She told them that they would be throwing away their lives for nothing. The humans sent one final message. When we look at your world, we do not see numbers. We do not see physics problems. We see 12 billion people who asked for help. We see children who deserve to grow up. We see a civilization that should not end. The rest of the galaxy said no. We say yes. That is all that matters. We will find a way or we will die trying, but we will not let you face this alone. Read the message 5 times. She did not know whether to feel hope or sorrow. These strange beings from a tiny blue planet were either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. But for the first time in days, the crying outside her window grew quieter. Word was spreading. Someone had answered. Someone was coming. It was not the great powers of the galaxy. It was not the ancient races with their vast fleets and superior technology. It was a young species that no one had heard of, from a world that no one thought mattered. Walked back to her window. The dying sun still burned in the sky. Her people were still doomed. Nothing had really changed. And yet somehow everything had changed. Someone had answered. Someone was coming. And for reasons she could not explain, believed them. These humans, these impossible creatures from the edge of nowhere, meant every word they had written. She did not know if they could save her world. But she knew, with sudden and perfect certainty, that they would try. That was more than anyone else had offered. It was enough to hope. Admiral stood before the United Earth Council. The room was full of the most powerful people from 50 human colonies. Presidents and generals and scientists all watched her with tired eyes. They had been meeting for 2 days without sleep. On the screen behind her was a picture of Prime, a beautiful world of crystal towers and singing cities. Below the picture were numbers, bad numbers, impossible numbers. 12 billion people, said. Her voice was calm but firm. That is how many will die if we do nothing. An old man in the front row shook his head. Admiral, we have seen the calculations. They are right. We do not have enough ships. We do not have enough time. We cannot evacuate 12 billion people in 18 months. Then we will build more ships, replied. A woman raised her hand. They have studied the star. They say it cannot be stabilized. Are we smarter than the? No, admitted. They are smarter than us, but being smart is not the same as being right. The room erupted in arguments. Some people said the mission was suicide. Others said Earth could not afford to spend so many resources on strangers. A few said it was not their problem. They had never helped humanity. Why should humanity help them? Let them argue. Then she raised her hand for silence. I have heard all the reasons we should not do this, she said. Now let me tell you why we will do it anyway. 300 years ago, when our ancestors first looked up at the stars, they asked a question. Are we alone? For centuries, we hoped the answer was no. We hoped that somewhere out there we would find friends, we would find neighbors, we would find family. She pointed at the screen. Now we have found them, thousands of species, millions of worlds. And when one of those worlds cried for help, what did the galaxy do? Nothing. They did math and said it was impossible. They ran simulations and said it could not be done. They wrote nice words and sent their regrets. His voice grew harder. That is not who we are. When we see someone drowning, we do not calculate the odds before we jump in. When a child is trapped in a burning building, we do not run simulations. We act. We help. We try. Even if we fail, we try. That is what makes us human." The room was silent now. "Will this be hard?" continued. "Yes. Will some of us die? Probably. Will we succeed? I do not know, but I know this. If we do nothing, 12 billion people will burn. Their children will scream, and there will be no one to save them. And we will have to live with that. We will have to look at ourselves in the mirror and know that we could have tried and we chose not to." She looked around the room. "I cannot live with that, can you?" The vote was unanimous. Operation Lighthouse was approved. What happened next was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every shipyard across human space began working around the clock. Factories that made consumer goods switched to producing evacuation pods. Mining colonies doubled their output. Scientists who had spent years competing with each other now shared their research freely. Old rivalries were forgotten. Old grudges were set aside. Ordinary people volunteered by the millions. Teachers and farmers and office workers trained to become emergency crews. Families donated their savings. Children collected scraps of metal for the shipyards. A famous musician sold all his possessions and gave the money to the project. He said he would make more music later. Right now, there was work to do. The great civilizations of the galaxy watched in confusion. They sent observers to document what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. The diplomats visited Earth and tried to understand why humans were wasting their resources on a lost cause. One lord asked a human worker why he was building ships that would probably be destroyed. The worker shrugged, "Because someone has to." "But you will gain nothing from this," they said. "They cannot pay you, they have nothing to offer." The worker looked at him with strange eyes. "Is that why you help people? Because they can pay you?" They had no answer. Meanwhile, Doctor was working on the impossible part. She was a small woman from Tokyo, only 34 years old. Her hair was always messy and she forgot to eat when she was thinking hard. She had spent her whole life studying stars. Now she was trying to save one. Her idea was crazy. Everyone told her so. They sent a formal request to have her examined by doctors. They thought she must be sick in her mind. The idea was called the siphon. It was a network of machines that would create artificial gravity wells around the dying star. These wells would pull away the extra mass that was making the star unstable. The mass would be thrown out into empty space, away from the planet. The physics was almost impossible. The engineering was even harder. Every simulation said it would fail. The machines would be destroyed. The star would explode faster. Everyone would die. Did not care what the simulations said. "Simulations are based on what we already know," she told her team. "They cannot predict what we have never tried. They have been studying physics for 1,000,000 years. They know everything that cannot be done, but they have forgotten how to ask what might be done." She worked for months without rest. Her team followed her without question. They built things that had never been built before. They solved problems that had never been solved. When something did not work, they tried something else. When that did not work, they tried again. 6 months after Operation Lighthouse began, the human fleet was ready. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in the Outer Rim. Not warships, not weapons, just ships for carrying people, ships for saving lives. The ambassador sent a private message to Earth. "Your species shows great courage. Your deaths will be recorded with honor in our archives." Admiral read the message and laughed. Then she ordered the fleet to move. As thousands of human ships jumped into faster-than-light travel, heading toward a dying world they had never seen, a young pilot asked his commander why they were doing this. The commander thought about it for a moment. "Because 12 billion people asked for help," she said, "and we were the only ones who said yes." The pilot nodded slowly. "Do you think we can actually save them?" The commander smiled. "I think we are going to find out." The fleet flew on through the darkness between stars. Behind them, Earth continued to build. More ships, more supplies, more hope. The galaxy said it could not be done. Humanity had never been very good at listening to what the galaxy said. The human fleet arrived at Prime on a day when the sky was bleeding. The dying star had grown angry. It threw fire into space. It painted the clouds in colors of violence. They had stopped looking up. They had accepted their end. Many of them had already begun their death songs, ancient melodies that their people sang when hope was gone. Then the ships appeared. At first there were only a few lights in the burning sky, then more, then hundreds, then thousands. Human vessels poured out of faster-than-light space like a river of stars. They were not beautiful ships. They were not elegant or graceful. They were rough and ugly and built in a hurry, but they kept coming. Ambassador watched from her tower as the human fleet filled the sky. She had believed they would come, but she had not imagined this. So many ships, so many people who had traveled so far to help strangers they had never met. Admiral's voice echoed across the planet, through every speaker and communication device. People of Prime, we are here. We have come a long way and we do not have much time, but I promise you this. Not today, not ever, not while we breathe. We will not let your light go out. The evacuation began immediately. It was chaos at first. There were beings of crystal and light. They were fragile. They could not be loaded onto ships like cargo. Each one needed careful handling. Each one needed protection from the radiation that poured from the dying sun. Human crews worked without stopping. They wore radiation suits that grew hotter every hour. They breathed recycled air that tasted like metal. The dying star cooked through their shielding. Doctors warned them that every hour of work was taking days off their lives. They did not stop. A young engineer named Maria Santos worked the evacuation deck of a transport ship. She was 26 years old. She had joined Operation Lighthouse because her grandmother had always told her that the measure of a person was what they did when others needed help. Maria carried children in her arms. They were so light, like holding pieces of colored glass. They made soft musical sounds when they were scared. Maria learned to hum to them, earth songs, lullabies her grandmother had sung to her. The alien children could not understand the words, but they understood the kindness. On her 15th hour of work without rest, a mother grabbed Maria's hand. The mother's crystal face could not make expressions like a human face, but her voice trembled. "Why do you do this?" the mother asked. "You are hurting yourself. Why do you hurt yourself for us?" Maria looked at the child in her arms. A little girl made of purple crystal, clutching a small toy that made chiming sounds. "Because she deserves to grow up," Maria said simply. "Because that is enough reason." The radiation sickness came quickly. Human bodies were not meant to endure such punishment. Doctors worked as hard as the evacuation crews. They treated burns and fevers and worse things. They gave medicine that helped a little. They gave encouragement that helped more. In the first month, 312 humans died. Their names were recorded. Their faces were remembered. And every single day, more volunteers arrived from Earth to take their places. The Galactic Concord sent observers to document the failure they expected. Instead, they saw something they could not understand. They saw humans crying over dead friends, then returning to work. They saw humans calculating their own shortened from radiation exposure, then volunteering for one more shift. They saw humans giving their food to refugees who could not eat it, just because the humans wanted to share something. An observer approached a human worker who was coughing blood into a cloth. The observer was recording everything for the archives. "You are dying," the observer said. "The radiation has damaged you beyond repair. You have perhaps 6 months to live. Why do you continue?" The worker was a man named James. He was 50 years old. He had been a teacher back on Earth. He had no family, no one waiting for him at home. "Because someone has to," James said. "That is not a logical answer." James coughed again. When he spoke, his voice was rough but certain. When I was a boy, I read stories about heroes, people who saved others, people who did what was right, not what was easy. I always wondered if I could be like them. If the moment came, would I be brave enough? Would I be good enough? He looked at the long line of waiting to board the ships, mothers holding children, old ones who had lived for centuries, young ones who had not yet begun to live. The moment came, James said, and I found out I am good enough, I am brave enough. For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am and exactly why I am here. I am here to help. That is all. That is everything. The observer had no response. In a million years of history, they had recorded many things. They had never recorded anything like this. Meanwhile, Doctor and her team were deploying the siphon. The massive machines took position around the dying star. Every reading said it would not work. Every calculation said they would die. They sent constant warnings that the humans were about to trigger a supernova that would kill everyone. His hands shook as she prepared to activate the system. Her team stood behind her. None of them had slept in days. All of them knew they might be dead in the next hour. "Any last words?" someone asked. Thought about it, then she smiled. "If this works, someone else can give the speech. If it does not work, there will be no one left to hear it. So let us skip the words and just do our jobs." She pressed the button. The machines came to life. The star screamed. And somewhere in the chaos, on the surface of Prime, a human woman was still humming lullabies to crystal children, loading them onto ships, saving them one at a time. She did not know if the star would explode. She did not know if any of them would survive. She only knew that there were more children to save. So she kept working. That was what humans did. That was who humans were. The star fought back. When the siphon activated, the dying sun seemed to know. It twisted and screamed. Fire exploded from its surface in waves taller than planets. The gravity wells that had built groaned under pressure they were never meant to handle. In the control room of the lead science vessel, alarms screamed in every direction. Red lights flashed on every screen. Numbers spun into territories that had no names. "The gravity wells are failing," someone shouted. "Compensate," ordered. Her fingers flew across the controls. "Increase power to Section 7. Redirect flow from Section 3. "We do not have enough power." "Then find more." The crew worked in desperate silence. Every second brought new problems. Every solution created new dangers. The star was not going quietly. It wanted to die in fire and fury. It wanted to take everyone with it. The observers watched from a safe distance. They were already writing their reports. They described the human effort as brave but doomed. They noted the exact moment when the siphon would fail and the star would explode. They calculated how quickly the fire would reach Prime, but did not know she was supposed to fail. For 6 hours, her team made adjustments, not big changes, small ones, tiny corrections that shifted the flow of energy by fractions of a percent. 17,000 adjustments in 6 hours, each one a guess, each one a gamble. On the surface of Prime, the evacuation continued. The sky above was a nightmare of fire and light. Debris fell from space. The ground shook with distant explosions. But the human crews did not stop. They could not stop. 8 billion had been loaded onto ships. 4 billion remained. Admiral stood on the bridge of her command ship. Her body was failing. The radiation had done its work. She had perhaps a year to live, maybe less. Her doctors had begged her to rest. She had refused. "How many more?" she asked. 4 billion still on the surface, her officer reported. "We need at least 19 more hours." Looked at the burning star. "Do we have 19 hours?" No one could answer. In the control room made her final adjustment. She had nothing left, no more tricks, no more ideas. The machines were doing everything they could. The gravity wells were holding barely. The star was still fighting. And then slowly something changed. The fire stopped growing. The explosions grew smaller. The star's angry red color began to fade, shifting toward orange, then toward yellow. "Is that possible?" someone whispered. Stared at the readings. Her hands were shaking. "It is working. The mass is being pulled away. The star is stabilizing." The observers stopped writing their reports. They stared at their instruments in silence. What they were seeing was impossible. Every simulation had said so. Every calculation had said so. And yet it was happening. The chief scientist watched for 4 hours without speaking. Finally, he said one word. "How?" No one answered him. There was no answer. Humans had simply refused to accept that it could not be done. They had tried anyway, and somehow, against every law of physics, they had succeeded. On Prime, the evacuation crews saw the sky begin to clear. The angry red glow faded. The falling debris stopped. For the first time in months, they could see stars. A human worker looked up and began to cry. Then he went back to loading refugees onto ships. The last transport lifted off with 19 hours to spare. Admiral watched from her bridge as the final vessel cleared the atmosphere. Behind them, the star that should have exploded now burned steady and calm. It was smaller than before, some of its mass thrown into space by the siphon. But it would live. For another 1 billion years, it would shine. 12 billion had been saved. Every single one. Let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for months. Around her, the crew was cheering. Some were crying, some were doing both. "Admiral," her first officer said quietly, "the Galactic Concord is hailing. They want to know how we did it." Smiled, she was tired, so tired. Her bones ached and her blood was poison and she would not live to see another year. But in this moment she felt something like peace. "Tell them we did not know it was impossible, so we just did it anyway." Across the human fleet, the celebration spread. People who had worked themselves to exhaustion, people who had given years off their lives to radiation exposure, people who had buried friends along the way, all of them allowed themselves to feel joy. But they also remembered. 8,416 humans had died during Operation Lighthouse, some from radiation, some from accidents, some from simple exhaustion. They had given everything they had. They had given more than anyone should have to give. Their names were carved into a great wall on the lead evacuation ship. Human tradition held that the names of heroes should be remembered. They adopted this tradition as their own. They added their own prayers to the wall. They sang their songs of gratitude for the dead. Ambassador found Admiral standing before the wall. The Admiral was alone, reading the names. Her body was thin and weak. She leaned on a cane. "You saved us," said. "You saved all of us." Did not look away from the names. "We lost good people." You lost them saving strangers, saving people you had never met, people who could never repay you. Is that strange to you? Thought about it? I do not know, perhaps. The rest of the galaxy did not come. They said it was impossible. They said the cost was too high. Finally turned to face her. The Admiral's eyes were tired but gentle. "The cost is never too high to save someone who needs saving. That is what we believe. That is what we have always believed. It is not about reward. It is not about thanks. It is about knowing that you did what was right, that when someone needed help you were there. That is enough. That is everything." Looked at this dying woman who had crossed the stars to save a people she had never known. She wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment. Instead, she simply took the Admiral's hand and held it. They stood together, in silence, before the wall of names. Behind them, through the great windows of the ship, the saved star of Prime glowed steady and bright. The impossible had been done. And humanity had done it. The great hall of the Galactic Concord had never been so quiet. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the chamber. Ancient races who had seen stars born and die. Powerful empires that ruled hundreds of systems. wise collectives that had studied the universe for millions of years. All of them sat in silence, waiting. They had gathered to discuss one question. It was a simple question, but it troubled them deeply. What were humans? The speaker rose first. His voice echoed through the chamber. We have studied humanity for 200 years. We considered them a minor species. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. They live such short lives that we barely notice their generations passing. By every measure, they should not matter. He paused. The chamber waited. And yet they did the impossible. They saved 12 billion lives when we said it could not be done. We must ask ourselves why. How did they succeed where we would not have even tried? More speakers rose. They talked about the mathematics of the evacuation. The numbers still made no sense. Humans had simply ignored the math and done it anyway. They spoke of the human willingness to die for strangers. This concept was foreign to them. They could not understand it. Finally, Ambassador rose to speak. She was the voice of the now, the representative of 12 billion saved souls. Her crystal body caught the lights of the chamber and scattered them like rainbows. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the great hall. For 10,000 years, my people looked at the stars and believed the universe was cold. We believed that if we ever faced destruction, we would face it alone. The great powers of the galaxy seemed so far above us, so ancient, so wise. Surely, we thought, if we ever needed help, they would come. She looked around the chamber, at the with their superior technology, at the with their vast fleets, at all the mighty civilizations that had done nothing. When our sun began to die, we called out to you. We begged for help, and you did math. You ran simulations, you wrote reports, you sent your regrets. Her voice grew stronger. Then humans came. They did not run simulations. They did not calculate odds. They heard that children were going to die, and they came. They came knowing they might fail. They came knowing they would lose people they loved. They came anyway. His crystal eyes seemed to glow. You ask what humans are, I will tell you. They are the species that answers. When the universe is cold and dark and everyone says nothing can be done, humans light a fire. When the numbers say it is impossible, humans ignore the numbers. When everyone else walks away, humans stay. She turned to face the full assembly. They did not save us because we are valuable. They did not save us because we could repay them. They saved us because we asked. That was enough for them. Our lives had value because we were alive. Our children deserve to grow up because all children deserve to grow up. That is what they believe. That is who they are. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the conquered voted. It was unanimous. Humanity would be granted a permanent seat on the Elder Council. They were the youngest species ever to receive this honor. 200 years from first contact to a voice in the ruling body of the galaxy. The human representative rose to accept. His name was James. He was old now, with white hair and kind eyes. He had been a diplomat for 50 years. He had helped write the treaties that brought Earth into the galactic community. He looked at the seat waiting for him, the seat of power, the seat of honor, the seat that every other species in the galaxy would have accepted without question. He did not take it. We are grateful for this honor, James said, but we must decline. The chamber erupted in confusion. The speaker demanded an explanation. The ambassador called it an insult, even looked shocked. James raised his hand for silence. We did not save the for power. We did not do it for a seat on your council. We did it because it was right, because someone needed help. That is all. That is everything. He looked around the chamber at all the ancient races watching him. You want to know what we want. You want to know what humanity asks in return. Here it is. Next time, stand with us. The chamber was silent. Next time a world faces the impossible, do not send your regrets. Do not do math and walk away. Stand with us. Help us save them. That is all we ask. That is all we have ever wanted. His voice grew soft but firm. We do not want to be the greatest species in the galaxy. We do not want to rule. We just want to be the ones who answer when someone calls for help, and we want you to answer with us. He bowed slightly to the assembly. Thank you for the honor, but a seat on the council is not why we came here. We came here because someone needed help. We will always come when someone needs help. We hope someday you will join us. James walked out of the great hall. The representatives of 1,000 worlds watched him go in silence. 5 centuries passed. The rebuilt, they found a new world to call home, a beautiful planet orbiting a stable yellow star. They built new crystal cities. They sang new songs. They raised new children. In the center of their capital, they built a monument. It was not a statue of a hero. It was not a celebration of victory. It was simple. A human hand made of white stone reaching upward, open, offering help. Below it, words carved in every language known to the galaxy. None answered their plea. They said it could not be done until humanity did. And below that, smaller, a quote from an old Earth poem. They had adopted it as their own. They taught it to their children. They sang it in their songs. Do not go gentle into that good night. Every year, on the anniversary of their salvation, they gathered at the monument. They lit lights and sang songs and told stories about the strange species that had crossed the stars to save them. And somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, humans continued to do what they had always done. They helped, they tried, they refused to accept impossible. They were not the oldest species in the galaxy. They were not the or the strongest or the most powerful. But they were the species that answered. And that made all the difference. The stars burned on through the endless night. And humanity reached toward them. Still helping. Still hopping. Still human. Forever.